If this man can write poetry just because he saw a typewriter, imagine what you can do.
Jingle with me, baby. Jingle with
Hey guys, Antavia here, aka Pen of the Beloved, and welcome back to my channel. So, today we are going to be talking about poetry, as always. It's either poetry or creativity, two of my favorite things. And so, if you've watched my latest video, one of my latest videos, it was all about how you can start writing poetry today. And you should totally check that video out. I'll have a link somewhere on the screen so that you can go to that video. But today's video is all about poets you should be reading today. So, if you are someone who is looking to be a poet, looking to get interested into reading poetry, I have a couple of suggestions for you today, and I will say these are totally my biased opinion of poets that you should start reading today, because these are people that I go to all the time when I'm in need of inspiration, or I just want to feel very deeply poetic about things and life and nature and love, and so that's why I like them. So I'm gonna do this a bit chronologically because I like chronological order most times. And so I'm gonna start with how I discovered each of these poets and basically give a backstory as to why I like them, and most of all, why you should be reading them. Alright, so number one is Tyler Knott Gregson. So he, I would say, in my opinion, is probably one of the beginning Instagram poets. I did not know what Instagram poetry was in 2013, 2014. So he is a poet that I just happened to discover, I believe, on Instagram or Facebook, and I was blown away by his words. I had never, at the time, modern poetry wasn't a very big thing in my life. It wasn't something I was super exposed to, because in high school and English courses we read a lot of romantic poets, we read typical older poets, not really more modern poets that a 16-year-old or a 15-year-old would have been aware of in 2013. And so I was not 15 or 16 in 2013. I was 17/18 in 2013, but I wasn't aware of them. And so Tyler Knott Gregson is someone I discovered on social media before Instagram poetry was even a thing. And I remember reading his work and was just blown away by how simple, not simple, but easy to understand, because a lot of times I think one of the reasons people get hung up on not wanting to read poetry is because of how hard it is to understand. And with his work, I was very much like, wow, this makes sense to me and I can relate to this and I get this. And so his work, this is his first book that he published, Chasers of the Light. Can you guys see that? Chasers of the Light is the first book that he published, and I like to take things slow, and so I still haven't finished this book, even though I bought it in 2014, 15. I loved it so much. I was like, I don't want to finish it so soon, but this is just one of the poems that I want to read. So this is Tyler Knott Gregson's poem. They don't really have titles. At least this book doesn't have titles. Maybe his other ones do. I believe he's written at least 2 or 3 more books since this one. But this poem says, "Speak to me with morning voices and glance across that pillow with dawn in your eyes. I want to hear you stir from sleep and listen to the sheets as they whisper of your rising. What worth does this day hold if it does not begin with you?" And it's just like, oh my gosh, like all of his stuff is just so good. All of it, really, it's beautiful. And I was just drawn by his use of words, and he's also a photographer, so he has photography in the book. And basically he discovered a typewriter one day in like this antique shop, and like sat down with a receipt paper and started writing poetry, and that's how he got started, was discovering a typewriter. If this man can write poetry just because he saw a typewriter, imagine what you can do. Okay, so The next poet that I am growing more and more in love with is Rudy Francisco, and I discovered him on YouTube some time ago when all I used to do is watch spoken word videos on YouTube before I knew people used YouTube to do other stuff. And so I discovered him performing a poem, and I think it was called I'm not a love poet, but if I was, something along those lines of that. But Helium by Rudy Francisco is a must-read, I believe, for anyone who's getting interested in poetry. And I once taught a poetry course to middle and high schoolers, and he is one of the poets that I referenced a lot, because if you are interested in learning about poetry and learning the craft of reciting poetry and even performing spoken word, he's definitely one person that would be helpful in that process. And his poems, there's one poem called Accent that I'm going to read. I'm not going to try to read it the way he would read it. I'm just going to read it. And it says, "My mother's accent is the most popular brand of salt in her country. She gently sprinkles a little on every word before she allows them to pass her lips. This is a ceremony that happens every time she has something to say. When foreign soil and home are synonymous, your mouth becomes a kitchen, each sentence an entree. Every time you speak, you are preparing a meal. The conversation is a dinner party and you are the chef, just hoping that you used all the correct ingredients." And all of his poems are just so good. They're just so good. And so, if you have not read anything by Rudy Francisco, if you have not watched any of his videos on YouTube, they are 10/10 would recommend, and I suggest that you do that after you finish this video and after you liked and subscribed and pressed the notification bell. Okay, last but not least is a poet that I grew to love more during my college days, and I would have a lot of writing professors who often would reference Mary Oliver and her work, and so the poet is Mary Oliver. There we go. This book is just so good. This one is called Felicity by Mary Oliver, and it's kind of considered, I think it's one of her latest collections of poetry, and they're very much like love poems, but much more intricate and deeper than that. And if you know anything about Mary Oliver, she writes a lot about nature and how she correlates nature and human experiences, integrating them so well. And there's just so much richness and originality and just simplistic beauty in her writing that you can't read Mary Oliver and go, I don't like this. I mean, you could, but I don't think it would be warranted. That's just my opinion. But I have so many sticky notes in here because I just love this book so much. So there's this one poem that I have a sticky note on called Everything That Was Broken. And the poem goes like this. Everything that was broken has forgotten its brokenness. I live now in a sky house. Through every window the sun. Also your presence, our touching, our stories. Earthly and holy both. How can this be? But it is. Every day has something in it whose name is forever. Seriously, it's just so good. It's so good. And this is another poem that I love by her that is so good. Okay, this one is called A Voice from I Don't Know Where. It seems you love this world very much. Yes, I said, this beautiful world. And you don't mind the mind that keeps you busy all the time with its dark and bright wonderings. No, I'm quite used to it. Busy, busy all the time. And you don't mind living with those questions. I mean, the hard ones that no one can answer. Actually, they're the most interesting. And you have a person in your life whose hand you like to hold. Yes, I do. It must surely then be very happy down there in your heart. Yes, I said, it is. And she has just numerous poems of small moments and small happenings between humanity, between humanity and nature and God and all of these just very intricate detailings of life you would never think to put in a poem that she does. And it's just absolutely beautiful. It really, really is. Okay, last bonus one is one poet that you should be reading is me. I have two poetry books. The first one is For Wander in the Wilderness. Ooh, yes. And this book I published in November of 2019. It's my first book, and it's pretty much just a recollection of moments in time after graduating college and going into different phases of life and what that was like for me. The second book is called An Armory of Love Poems, which is my most recent poetry book. And I have this one right here, which if you've watched my latest video, you've seen this book. And this book is, I love both of my books, but I really am very proud of, I'm proud of both of them, but I'm very proud of this one. And it's just a compilation of numerous love poems, and it's just wonderful. And I will have links below where you can purchase my books as well as links to purchase the other books. I really hope that if you are interested in learning about poetry, that this kind of motivates you to seek out people you may have never heard of before or ones you have heard of and now you're more interested in reading their work. But do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Stay creative.